Well, I was after Father Sheehan, asking him whether we could have another assistant. And he didn't think we needed one because we were doing okay with two.
You and Mr. Dunn?
Every Dunn and I, yes. And so after a while he asked me, why would you need a third coach? And my answer to him was every time we went up and we played the Suburban North teams, we got tired of shaking hands with their coaches, and they only had to shake hands twice. So eventually we got the extra assistant. So I did. We were pretty much Jesuit oriented in my little small town, St. Mary's, and that's where the Jesuit seminary was. And at that particular time, all through grade school and high school, we had about 200 Jesuit seminarians that were studying for the priesthood. And my dad worked for the college, for a number of years. And that's how we got acquainted with the Jesuits.
What state was that? You said St. Mary's. What state was that?
That was in Kansas, St. Mary's, Kansas. It was about 90 miles west of Kansas City. And the Jesuits were there for many, many years, and they finally sold all their properties, oh golly, about 15, 20 years ago. And they had a nice college campus, had a nice college church out on the hill, had an old baseball field available, a big gymnasium. Well, had a couple of gyms in the one big building. So
You went to Rockhurst too, didn't you?
I went to Rockhurst, yes. In fact, the Jesuits, my mother was a great home brew maker. And she would make home brew for my dad. And maybe she might make dandelion wine, grape wine, and then for the kids, a little root beer every now and then. And the Jesuits at that time had a little cabin down on the river. And there might be 6 or 8 of them that would take off, and they could go down there for the weekend. So their big stop was always a house to see whether they could pick up a couple of quarts of home brew. So that's how we got acquainted quite a bit with the Jesuits also. And then there was a Father Smith that eventually got me a scholarship at Rockhurst. So I just couldn't break away from the Jesuits. So,
What was it like working with the Jesuits and working here at St. Louis High?
here at St. Louis U High, very comfortable. Had a good relationship, with the priests and the scholastics. In fact, I remember when I came here, we must have had a dozen scholastics. And they were pretty much the disciplinarians in the hallway, as I remember. And the first couple of scholastics I got, Father Houlihan, who is still here on campus, and Father Costello, and they were my cage people, and they took care of a lot of equipment for us and handouts and things like that. So they were 2 big helps that I had that I didn't have before I came to St. Louis U High. So
Now, I remember that Father Durso was also one of those.
right, Father Durso came a little bit later, yeah,
But was that,
and later became the principal. Yes.
but was working in the cage for you one of their special benefits, or how did that come about?
Well, a very definitely was, because in my previous years of coaching before I came to St. Louis U High, you did everything. And if you didn't do it, it wasn't done. So when I came here, that was a tremendous help, they could do a lot of work with the equipment, and after the seasons were over with, they could go ahead and box up the equipment and put it away for the year. So that was a big benefit. So, you know,
Do you have any other scholastics who wound up becoming principals, or kind of like you trained them? Or?
well, you know, Father Houlihan became the principal,
Right.
and then I think he left us for a while, went to DeSmet, or in fact, I think he even went to Denver. So it's kind of hard to keep track of them there for a while. They were shifted around so much. But then Father Durso became the principal. And then another one, after I got out of the service, got back to Rockers to finish up my last 2 years, Father Bailey was a classmate of mine. And he later came to St. Louis U High and became principal. So he was another close Jesuit while I was here.
He was a classmate of Rockers?
He was,
A classmate of Rockers?
right, yeah. So after I got out of the service, I still had 2 more years to get my degree before I went out into teaching. And then next thing I know, here Father Bailey is here at St. Louis U High. Father Kellett, I got to know when I was at Rockhurst. And the first time I ever met him was at a Mass. And at the end of the Mass, if you remember, they always came down to the altar and said a few prayers afterwards. And that's when I found out he stuttered so much. And he became Father also. So, but really a great guy, and so many stories I could tell about some of the Jesuits.
Well, we've got time.
Well, trouble is some of them wouldn't be here to defend themselves, so. But no, those were great years, so.
What
In
were
fact,
some of the most memorable ones you remember?
things while I was here,
You know, some of the priests and other people who were here.
well, I can remember when I first came here, how well the family was accepted. In fact, I still have a picture appearing on the old stage down below. And at that time, back in those years, they even brought in 2 Volkswagens into, that used to be the auditorium. So they treated the family real well and accepted the family pretty good. So it was a good time to get acquainted with everyone. In fact, one story that I had, Gene Hart had taken me around to visit with several parents. And I ran into one woman, she said, "Have you sold your house yet?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Well, don't sell it until after the CBC game." So if you beat CBC, it was okay to sell your house. And you could be here for a while. So,
Otherwise, you might have to pack. Huh?
so that was one of my first initiations to St. Louis. So, but all the time I was here, it was so much different than what I had up in Kansas City and Leavenworth. And I need to clarify that. That was teaching at Leavenworth, not at the prison. So, but up there, you know, you were teaching co-ed students, which was a whole lot different when I came here. And back then, people couldn't realize the conditions that we taught in. In fact, we taught in a church basement. That was our classroom. In the last 2 years I was there, I taught my classes in a bowling alley. So that was kind of neat because I had the elevated seats and everything, and I could always see if there were any kids out of line, and if they were, I'd threaten them to go set the pins up, and I'd keep throwing bowling balls at them. So, but no, those were memorable days, and those were the best conditions that we had at the time, until we got the new school building at Bishop Miege. But I was only there for 1 year before coming to St. Louis. In all my years of being involved in high school activities, the one thing I could always go back to and remember was my high school coach. And he did so many things for us. In fact, he became a Jesuit, graduated from Creighton, and was an All-American basketball player. And he was my coach for 2 years. And the one thing he always taught us, and he was always after us saying, one thing we got to remember, if you want to be successful, remember that God gave us 2 ends, one to think with and one to sit with. And if you ever wanted to be successful, it depends on which one you're going to use. And there was only one answer: heads you win, tails you lose. And the neat part of my high school coach, later became a Jesuit, I came to St. Louis U High, and I went through the yearbooks, and my high school coach was a principal here at St. Louis U High, Father Van Ackern. And that goes back to, I think, 46 to about 51. It's too bad I couldn't have been teaching about that time. That would have been real neat. And then later on in the 50s, I ended up going into my college basketball Hall of Fame. And the first person that came around into the building, the first thing he did was this. And it was my high school basketball coach, and this time he was a chancellor at Rockhurst College. So it's amazing how that circle just went around and how I followed him to come back each time. So that was another thing about having a close relationship with the Jesuit community. Well, I would certainly hope that all the years that I was coaching, that I did a good job. And the one thing I always remembered when I first went into teaching, there were basically about 4 things that you have to be serious about. And I always thought, and I would always tell people, number 1, you are in a people business. You're dealing with people. Number 2, I always felt, now, when you're working with kids, you're working in the development and growth stage. And then you have another thing, you're thinking about installing confidence and stuff like that in students. And number 4 was discipline. But the good fortune, again, the schools where I taught, they were all parochial schools, so discipline was not a problem. It was never a problem here, as it would be, would that I have been in a public school system where it would have been a little more difficult. But I could remember how the scholastics always patrol the hallway.
You did a good job. I think we were all lucky, though, that you had that order of principles.
Well, back then, you could threaten kids, but today you can't touch them.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's a different story. But I just don't know what else I could do to tell myself that I have been so blessed that I've been in the right place at the right time when I first got started. And it's a choice. I always thought if I had to do it all over again, I'd do it again. but I had so many other opportunities that I could have gotten into. I was supposed to sign a Yankee baseball contract when I got out of the service. I turned that down because of the money. And back then, you had to start out in Class D ball, and within 1 year, I'd have to jump to AAA to do any good at all. So instead, I went to pass pitch softball and played in a world tournament. And I got to thinking, if I could have hit a baseball like I hit a softball, maybe I could have made it. And then I had a chance to play pro basketball. Not on the regular team, but on the practice team. And yet we played big-time teams like the Globetrotters. We played House of David. We played teams from the Zola Pistons and things like that. But that didn't last too long because the paychecks bounced higher than a basketball. So that was the end of my pro basketball. So
Did you enjoy coaching basketball as much as football?
I did. Well, basketball was my game all through high school because being in a small town of a little over 1,000 people, we had a public school and a Catholic school. And I always told people that the name of my high school had more letters in it than we had boys in the high school, so therefore we couldn't play football. And that's how we got the Jesuits, to coach us in basketball. And what we went through, it was most difficult for people to understand, but when I was a freshman and sophomore, I always told people we had an outdoor gymnasium. It was a concrete slab, and that's where we practiced basketball. Until Father Van came along and he got permission to bring us over to the college gym. So we had a gymnasium, an unheated gym, to practice in anyway, so.
At least no wind.
So, right, so those are the things we went through while we were in school, so. But back then, we never thought of anything else. That's the way we lived, and that's what we did, and that was most satisfying until all of a sudden I graduate and I get to the big city and I find out, all the plush things the other high schools had and stuff like that.
Different life.
Yeah, it was very different. So
You must have worked with Father Kellett for quite a while. What was he like?
Father Kellett, I tell you what, Father Kellett was a prince. And I think he did so much, to help kids and spent so much time with them that he was hard to beat. So, but he was very close. He used to come out to the house quite a bit. We could play bridge and things like that. Of course, there I had a cabinet with a little scotch and stuff also, so we enjoyed playing.
Enjoyed that?
He enjoyed playing bridge. But he was really great. And the thing is, the only time the Jesuits had any hard drinks would be when you had faculty meetings and things like that, faculty dinners. And after a couple of drinks, the boss would come along, gather up all the bottles and go ahead and store them. So a lot of times Father Kellett would come on over and ask me what my free period was. And I'd pass it on to him, and he said, well, I want you to go up to 905 and get me a box of cigars. Well, I knew what a box of cigars was, it was a Scotch bottle. So anyway, Father Mattioni came along from Denver, from Regis College, and came here. He was at St. Louis U High for a number of years, and he got to be a close friend. So after a while, he says, "We're drinking up all your liquor. You're going to have to come up to our room." So naturally, I was invited, and we always had shaved ice. And Father Mattioni would take the scotch bottle and he'd fill up the glass of ice, and Father Kellett would stir it with his finger, to get the ice to dissolve, and that was the water mixture. So after a while, with about 3 or 4 gulps, he had that down, and a little bit later he'd say, "Louis, don't you also think you ought to fill this up again?" And Father Mattioni would say, "Dang you, Kellett, I can't afford you." But anyway, those are the fun times we had. So, and a lot of people didn't know what was going on at the time. So, but I did have the good fortune. I was just wondering if me having scotch, really made them friendly toward me. But no, they were great people.
Who were some of the other memorable characters you remember from being here?
Oh, golly. I remember Charlie Conway. You remember him?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Carl Miller,
Chemistry teacher?
chemistry teacher. Carl was a neighbor of mine, only lived about 3 blocks from me. And, well, let's see. Well, of course, Ebby Dunn. And I always said, Ebby was one of the most loyal people I ever had on my staff. And we spent a lot of time together.
He was your only staff for a while, wasn't he?
He was what?
He was your only staff for a while.
Right, yeah. Well, I had one when I first came here, Dick Volkmer. And he was here for 2 years. And Dick was a very good coach. I hated to lose him, but he was on Gene's staff, and he was a little disappointed because he didn't get the job. And that was understandable. And then he left and got a job up in St. Charles. And then Ebby moved up from B team up to the varsity with me. I can remember all the times after practice how we were down in the PE room and with enough chalk, where we could diagram formations and plays and things, trying to get ready for the next game. And those were some good remembrances that I've had. And then, of course, later on, in the mid-'70s, in 1975, soccer moved from the winter months to the fall months, so I lost Ebby. So, there again, I felt somewhere along the line I was going to be at a great loss, because I've had him for a number of years. But you always have to think, if good things happen for them, they need to go, and soccer was Ebby's sport.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to agree with him, that he'd go to soccer. So, but other than that, it was kind of hard to replace some of those coaches, and they basically, they're not always the same, but. Yeah, while I was here at St. Louis U High, like I say, I can be very thankful for all the good things that happened. My thought had always been, do things with respect and treat other people like you want to be treated. And I think I learned that from my dad years ago. And I thought I did a pretty good job.
Well, I think a lot of the students and athletes learned that from you.
And all those things, all those times, I always had one comment that I would make. Never question my integrity, because whatever I did, I hope I did for the betterment of the students and faculty members that I had dealings with. And yet, I still thought that somewhere along the line, maybe I made a few mistakes. But I also came to the conclusion nobody is perfect, no matter how hard we try. So,
Exactly. I was looking back at your record, it's pretty amazing. You were here for close to 29 years, 30 years or so, and you had over 200 wins. You were selected the Missouri High School Coach of the Year in 1973. Your teams went to the state playoffs 6 times and won the state 4A championship in 1970. With the Bi-State Conference champs 8 times. You were ranked in the top 10 St. Louis Prep Bowl 17 times. You were inducted into the Missouri Sports Hall of Fame in 1998. You're also assistant coach at Washington U and Vianney, and something that I didn't realize, you actually coached the St. Louis Gamblers.
right.
How do you explain your consistent winning all the time? What was your secret?
Well, you know, I did so many things when I first got into coaching, you know, never having played high school football. I didn't play football until I got to Rockers, and I played for 3 years. And then my senior year, we had a coach that coached football and basketball, and I had hurt my knee playing football, and he wouldn't let me play football my senior year. But here again, I had the great advantage when I first came to Rockhurst. Coaches seemed to think I was good enough. I could be a starter my freshman year. So I was a starter for 4 years at Rockhurst in basketball. But when it came to football, and when I went into teaching, it was all sports. Football, basketball, track, or football, basketball, baseball, whatever, swimming. It didn't make any difference, but you taught it. And I worked in a swimming program for 34 years, so I think I could handle a swimming team if needed, which I did. In the same way with varsity baseball. When the coach left, well, you end up taking over the varsity and finish out the season. So you do those things. But I still get back to the point, you know, when my high school coach said, if you want to be successful, heads and tails. So when I got into coaching, I must have gone to 200 football clinics to learn more about football. And during my coaching experience, the one thing I thought I did well, it's not what I wanted to run, it's what the kids handled best. I wasn't one of these coach, I want to run the I formation, hell or high water, we're going to run the I formation. But if the kids can't handle it, it's not a good formation. So I've gone to the I formation split backs, I've gone to wishbone, I've gone to wing T, I've gone to the shotgun formation, whatever fit the kids best and what they could handle, and not necessarily what I would like to run at this time. And that's the feeling I had. That's why the kids were as fortunate as they were. They could handle things. And as long as they had confidence, they believed in everything, and they would complement one another, we could be successful. And most of the time they were, because if you broke down, maybe John Pace picked you up. Or maybe it was Tom Shaner. Okay, you made a bad play, Tom made a good play. Next time Tom made a good play and you picked Tom up. So I always felt the kids complimented one another. So when they won a ball game, they were the ones that won it. And I used to tell them every now and then, maybe I lost this one. You didn't lose it, I did. But anyway, I had that confidence in the kids because they believed in themselves. And they had a lot of confidence in the things that they had to do, and they would do them. So I had gone to different defenses, made up my own defense. We came out, we ran a double huddle defense at one time for about 3 years after a bad practice. Okay, we had a knockdown, drag-out scrimmage, and we broke the teams up on left side and right side, and then would see who gave up the most yardage. And that was one of the best scrimmages we ever had because the guys were fighting one another. If the right side made a tackle on the other side, they wanted the points for it. And they got to the point that they had so much confidence in their own units. When we first started out, we had 3 huddles: the left huddle, right huddle, and the secondary huddle. But after a while, it came to find out the only thing the secondary had to do was yell cover 2 or cover 5. It was that simple. So anyway, we took the left safety and right safety and put them in their respective huddles. But here's a middle safety, and he asked me a silly question: what huddle do I go into? And I didn't know. I never even thought about it. So my comment to him was, well, I'll tell you what you do. Go into the left huddle, then go into the right huddle. Whoever tells the best jokes, join them. And that's how he could shift back and forth. But so that was my own defense. So I at least felt, in all those years, I did a lot of innovating. And a lot of it because I've gone to so many clinics. And eventually I got down to the point. Right now, I told somebody about a month ago, after I thought about all my coaching years, I got to thinking I need to pat myself on the back. But I can't raise my arms any higher than that, and I can't get around to pat myself. But anyway,
You got a lot of pats from other people.
going over all those years, I thought I did one good job. But I'll tell you, the final analysis, I have to go back and keep thinking about how fortunate I've been. In fact, when I grew up through grade school and high school, we were dirt poor, and I came from absolutely nothing all through grade school and high school, except for my parents, being able to support a family of 9. So it must have been the home brew and the wine and whatever.
Your mom was a good brewer. Huh?
Yeah, but she was a great person, how she could take care of things, how fortunate I was. And right now I'm trying to put things together in a book. And I start out with the old house that I lived in, and I put a little inscription down on the bottom of the picture. I never forgot where I came from. And then I got to think, well, that's not enough. So right down below, I typed another sign under it. I never forgot who got me where I am. So here I am, and I know who got me there, and it had to be the kids, had to be the administrators. You know, they gave me the opportunities to work. So how much fortunate could I be? Except right now, I'm going on 92. I have no feeling, you know, that I can do things with my hands. I have dropsy. And I drop so many things that I have to stoop over and pick up. And I always ask people, have you ever seen a 91-year-old guy cry? And I do. I cry a lot. But then I have a lady friend now that I've known for 60-some years, and she tells me how lucky I am, the things I can still do, that people who are 50 years younger than I am can't do that.
That's right.
But then I have to start thinking, well, she's right, because how fortunate have I been, you know? So that's pretty much my life.
You've had such a long experience here with over the close to 30 years. Do you have a memorable game that comes back to you? I know you're winning your state championship was probably really exciting.
Oh, I could tell you, you know, maybe a number of things that happened. Well, first of all, you know, coming in my first year, you know, and the Hungry Huns beat CBC, I think it was something like 30-something to 6, which was a good start. Another one that was memorable and yet very sad was when D.C. Wilcott and I got together and we were going to play the first game at Busch Stadium. And we played before 32,000 people. But that was a sickening day because CBC beat us 30-something to 6 or 7. And I remember that dang game. Second half, we were leading at halftime and weren't supposed to, but they were ranked number 1, we were ranked number 2. First play from scrimmage, they throw a flat pass, 40-some yards. They go in to score. They kick off to us. We fumble a kickoff. 3 or 4 plays later, they scored. They kicked off to us again. We fumble a kickoff. They go in and score again. So they kick off the third time, and this time we fool them. We don't fumble a kickoff. We fumble a first play from scrimmage. And they go in to score. So I still remember that day and how sickening it was and how badly I felt for the ball players. But the best one that we had, and this, it was in 81. We're down at the stadium. And I got to thinking, you know, why did I even schedule a bus to come down here? We weren't a real good ball club that year. But we come down, CBC scored 2 touchdowns in the first 8 minutes of the game. So the first touchdown, they went for 2 and didn't make it. And the second touchdown, they went for 2 again, and the quarterback fumbled the ball. We never crossed the 50-yard line until about 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter. Other than that, it was 3 and kick. But with 5 minutes to go, we block a kick. The kick was picked up, run in for a touchdown. We kicked the extra point, 12-7. So now we kick off again. So now they run 3 plays and they have to punt. We take the ball, we get past the 50-yard line, and we go all the way down to the 1-yard line, and a kid jumps offside with 13 seconds left in the ball game. So anyway, we call a timeout, and I can remember now, how can we get the ball into the end zone? So I decided we'd go ahead and run a 17 sprint option with Randy Latore to carry the ball. And I can remember Gary Kornfeld told me, he said, Coach, we haven't run that for about the last 4 ball games. So I figured that was a good time to run it. But tell your quarterback, don't you ever think about keeping the ball, pitch it. So we went in and scored with 13 seconds left. Then I had to tell the kicker, don't kick the ball to so-and-so. Got that? Yeah, okay. So he kicks off the kickoff. And where does the ball go? Didn't go to the guy that I wanted to go to, but it goes to their best runner. And he takes off, and he gets all the way down to about R35, and one of the guys tripped him up. We went 14 to 12. And I think that was probably the most exciting game that we had while I was here.
Sounds like it.
But there were others, you know. I mean, we played a lot of good ball clubs. Would go to Cape Girardeau, would go to Jeff City. We played Jeff City 17 years in a row. Nobody's ever done that from St. Louis. We played Columbia Hickman. We played Hazelwood Central when they had Tony Van Zandt for 3 years. We played Riverview Gardens when they had their good teams. In fact, when we won the state, we had to play them 2 games in a row to get to the finals. And we beat them, I think, 15 to 7 at their place, and then we beat them, I think, 10 to 7 at Washington U to go into the state finals. So that was another big game. But there are so many others, you know, that I could think of, you know, where the kids really did a great job of winning.
You've had some experience at other high schools too. How would you describe San Luis High compared to other high schools? Is there anything that makes it different?
Well, you know, you're dealing with different people. When I first got started, as I mentioned, you know, the co-ed school, so now you're dealing with girls, you're dealing with boys. And when I was teaching, you know, the classes were all together. Until the last few years, you know, they decided when they taught American government and sociology, then they split the boys and the girls into different classes. And that was the only time I had a separation before I came to St. Louis High. And here it was all boys, so it was all tailor-made when you got here. So, you know, when I first got here, well, I taught history classes. I'll tell you, there were so many things, you know, that I enjoyed so much. And I was so thankful that I was at school 1, 2, 3. And then the last 5 years, I taught at Vianney. And while I was there, the head coach was one of my football players here. And the first thing I told him, Gene, you are the head coach, but I'm going to be in your hip pocket. So I drew a picture of an outhouse with a moon on the side and a cattywampus sign that said Martel Shed House of Football Plays. And then a little box on the right side, please deposit $1 for each play. So every time I'd come over to Vianney, I'd get on a board and I'd diagram a play with a note from the old shed house. But for 5 years, I taught out there. Yeah, and it was interesting because here I was working with one of my players, and again, pretty good kids. So no matter where you went, if you went to a boys' school, they're pretty much the same. You know, they all have one thing in mind. They want to do everything with confidence and to the best of their abilities. And he finally decided, you know, hard work has never hurt anybody. So they were so great.
Over your time here, have you seen, did you see a lot of changes?
Well, I have. I've seen the changes, you know, where lay people came in as principals. I've seen it, you know, with men and a woman. So that was a change. Now, the Jesuits are not in the offices as they used to be. Other than that, well, the big change is they're gone. We don't have that many. I always thought, you know, when we got down to the point, you know, as far as scholastics are concerned, you always needed at least 2 scholastics. Because if there was one scholastic, you know, he was always the odd man out. So this way would have somebody, you know, that they could converse with one another. But a lot of times that didn't happen, so that's a big change. But I can still come down here and I can see, you know, some of the priests that were here. Father Houlihan has been here very long. Now we have a lay president, and we've had several other than Jesuits. And the one we have right now, Dave Laughlin, I think has done one hell of a job. He came from Rockhurst High School to St. Louis University High School. And I can't even remember how long he's been here now, but evidently he's done a big job. Another good thing that's happening, and I just got this phone call the other day, and I've been working my butt off for 2 years trying to get Henry Jones, who was a football player here. I think Henry graduated in 86, 85 would have been his last year. Played 4 years at Illinois. He played 10 years with the Buffalo Bills in 4 Super Bowls with Jim Kelly, the quarterback. He played 1 year with the Vikings, 1 year with the Falcons in Atlanta, and right now he is a scout for Atlanta. And I'm even on the voting board, you know, to try to get Henry into the St. Louis Sports Hall of Fame. So last week I got a call from the executive secretary. Well, we had a meeting, and we think we're going to put Henry in the Hall of Fame. And now that's happening on the 29th of January, and it's going to be here. So I think that's really a neat thing. You know, they're going to induct him into the St. Louis Sports Hall of Fame at St. Louis U High. And it took me 2 years to finally get that done. And right now, for 2 years, I've been trying to get him into the Sports Hall of Fame in Springfield, which I am a member of. And I have a liaison person there on the board and can't get anything done to get Henry into the Missouri Sports Hall of Fame. And there for a period of time, I would go to the hall every year because I knew somebody going in. And they've had St. Louis Cardinals, St. Louis Rams, Kansas City Chiefs that didn't play in the pros as much as Henry did, and they're in the Sports Hall of Fame, and they're not even from the state of Missouri. And I can't understand this one. But I hope I can get that put in now before I'm long gone. So, because Henry deserves it.
He's lucky to have such a backer.
Please.
He's lucky to have such a backer.
Oh my goodness. Well, anyway, I talked to some guy that was on the executive board, and I asked him what's going on down there, and the first thing he did was this: money. So it becomes a point. Now, how many tables will you purchase at $1,500 a table? Because all they think about is crowd. So, but I'm hoping I can win the lottery and maybe I could buy a few tables and get Henry in. So I am so elated, and I want to be here when this happens because I think it's going to be a big day for Henry, and I'm happy for him.
For you.
Yeah. Excuse me. So you know how happy I am. Well, I could probably think of other people, you know, that I've had good relationships with the faculty. Joe Vitale, and I remember when Joe was hired. I don't know how many of you people know what his dad was. His dad was one of the big mafia people in St. Louis. And I could remember when he was interviewing with Father Sheehan about the job, he said to Father Sheehan, "Do you know who my dad is?" And the one thing I really enjoyed when Father Sheehan answered him, he said, "I'm not hiring your dad, I'm hiring you." So, and that made me feel real good. But there are other teachers, you know, that I felt good about. Emmett Hannick with his basketball coaching, you know, and Emmett had some great years. And one thing that happens, you have a bad year, then bad things happen. I think Emmett's last year, they won 3 ball games. But it was not a good basketball team. And my last year, the same way. And if I had to do it all over again, I don't think I would have retired. I would have stayed on because I enjoyed it so much. I've been involved 53 years of coaching. And I did have an opportunity to coach the semi-pro team. Jim Otis, who played for the Cardinals, was the guy that recommended me for the job. And I look back, my salary was $5,000. And then I look at the St. Louis Rams, the guy smiles going to the bank $7 million a year and having a hard time winning ball games. And I had 2 coaches. I was the offensive coach, and I had a black guy that was with the Washington Redskins 1 year, and he was my defensive coach. And we won a Super Bowl. We ended up 14-2, and I got fired.
You didn't get a raise?
I got fired. And the reason, they said they wanted somebody with college or pro experience, and I only had high school experience. So they hired a college coach, and the next year they went 7-7. So, and I got to thinking, now should I pat myself on the back? Oh, shoot.
Over your career, how have you seen changes in football?
How did what?
Have you seen a lot of changes in football during your career?
I have, Dick, I tell you, what really ticks me off when I go to ball games and there is no defense. I wonder where in the hell did the defense go?
1-505-2
And
899.
And I go to ball games, and now I see there's 7 coaches on a staff, but there's no defense. Everybody wants to score. Shut up. But I was wondering what I would be doing if I were still coaching, and what I would do about stopping people. But there are certain things that you need to do on how the formation is set up, in my opinion.
11:23
You want
a.m.
to stop that? Well,
It's stopped.
is it okay?
But I think I would have reasons to try something different. I could remember going down and playing CBC at Public School Stadium when they were running the wishbone, and we played a 10-man line. The deepest guy from the line of scrimmage was 5 yards, and we beat them. They couldn't get started because we made the quarterback do something before he wanted to do it. And a lot of times he made bad pitches. So we beat them with a 10-man line. That was a new innovation, And then if we played the wishbone, earlier, you remember the linebackers would key through the guards. And the rule was he come, I come, he go, I go, he drop, I drop. Well, that's changed now too, because now your backs are going to control everything. And people would go ahead and key on the line, the halfback right in front of them. I would always cross key, because if he moved that direction, we knew where the ball was going. Because the other guy may come on up, he may be the lead blocker, but the other guy is going to be the pitch man. So I thought at least in a lot of respects I was a little bit innovative. And with the kids believing what they had to do is what made it successful, because they're the ones that did it. So the only thing I could do is stand on the sidelines and say, okay, they did their job. And in fact, one mother once told me, she says, I don't know how you can be so calm and collected. You get a boy out of the game and you bring over, you got your arm around him. And I said, I should invite you down on a lower field, when he made a mistake on the field and I got my arm around him and a smile on my face and I'm squeezing a baby fat. So I could make silly comments like that. So, but I don't know what else I could say, other than the fact, again, I'm the luckiest guy on 4 wheels now.
Well, I think the students and athletes have been pretty lucky too.
Well, I would hope so, and I got to thinking, was I rough on them? And I asked different players, was I a dictator? And they would tell me no, but I thought I was a big disciplinarian because I wanted things done right. And it took a while, but they usually ended up doing things right. So, but
Well, that shows from your record, things went right
but
more times than not.
but anyway, and I think the kids looked to you to be able to give them things, that they can do. And as I always said, well, they helped one another.
Exactly.
And that's why they were so successful. And I'm sure there are other schools, that do the same thing. You know, they have kids, you know, that do well. The only ones I'm really familiar with would be teams like Chaminade, Vianney, and going back to the McBride days and Assumption over on the east side. Althoff, Belleville East. You know, I'm sure a lot of those coaches did a lot of good, you know, for their ball players, and their ball players played well. And being the executive secretary of the Missouri State Football Coaches Association for 34 years, I have seen so many good coaches leave the profession because they're in the wrong place at the wrong time. And had they been in the right place, you know, they would, a lot of them might still be coaching. But when you're there and you get your heads bopped around, you know, because you're not in a good situation, and they get out and get into some other business. So I've seen a lot of good ones go. So, and there were some I wouldn't have on my staff. So,
Well, Coach, we really appreciate your taking time to give us these reminiscences. They're going to mean a lot to everyone.
well, it's been my pleasure, like I say, to be here, and how well I was treated, and what St. Louis U High has done for me. And I hope in some way or form I could reciprocate and do something, you know,
Got a lot already.
that would be good for St. Louis U High. And still goes back to my original connection with the Jesuits. In fact, I was turned down for the Rockhurst High School job. And I tried to figure out why. And the assistant football coach told me, he said, well, I kind of felt, you know, that you weren't calm enough on the sidelines or on the basketball court. So anyway, I thought, well, I'll get my evens with Rockhurst. So when I was at St. Agnes, and we had an enrollment of about, well, when I first started there, it was 150 students. And then when we played Rockhurst the first time, we had about a little over 200 students, and they beat us 26-13. And in my last year there, we lucked out on them 35 to 14. So we got our evens.
That's good.
So anyway,
Well, thank you very much. This has been great.
well, you know, I'm always so happy to get back and see guys, you know, that I may not have seen for 40, 50 years, and I always know that maybe I was a part in their lives, you know, that the dealings you had with them, they left here and came out as good human beings and doing very well.
Well, you had a big part in that.
And that, I'll tell you what, to be a part of something like that really gives you a good feeling. You know, well, I can remember Joe, you know, back in '59. I can remember Harry back in '62 or something like that. So the enjoyment was mine. So, and I've always been thankful from where I came from. I've never forgotten that. And I still want to put this book together, you know, starting my grade school days on up to my coaching days.
You'll have a lot of people who would love to see that.
Well, it's going to be hard to find a lot of pictures that I want to find. So, but here again, I had the great fortune when I was at Rockhurst. In '42, I joined the Navy. December of '42. I went into a V-12 program as an enlisted man and came out as an ensign. So I went to what was the equivalent of a midshipman school. and had the good fortune of having a good boat group because we were the ones that landed troops and equipment on the beaches on invasions. And fortunate enough that I was able to come out of that and came out as a Lieutenant JG, and actually could have stayed in the Navy. But I always got to thinking, I wonder what it would be like if I could get into teaching and coaching. And that's what I ended up doing. So there again, you could see the good fortune that came to me,
We were fortunate for it too.
even with the service years. And very fortunate to be able to come out of it all. And knowing that some that never came back. So I always couldn't go back and say, "Dear Lord, help me."
Exactly. Thank you.
Okay,
very
well,
much.
thank you, Dick. Thank you very much.